The following is a Podcast One Minnesota production.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
If it's made in Minnesota, who's making it and how?
Yeah, you got that right.
It's the makers of Minnesota, focusing on the products and services uniquely made in Minnesota, and conversations with the makers, entrepreneurs, and innovators in Minnesota about how they conceived of their products and how they brought them to market. With Stephanie Hansen, it's the makers of Minnesota.
Hi, it's Stephanie Hansen, and you're listening to The Makers of Minnesota, and we are here with episode 45, which is pretty amazing that we've done 45 of these little glimpses into people in our town doing cool things, making cool stuff. Today we are talking to Chank Diesel. His real name is Charles Anderbach, but I asked him if it was okay to call him Chank. He said, yeah, everybody calls me Chank. How you doing?
Great.
Chank, you do something that I feel like is something not many people do. It turns out, I guess there are some people that do it. I did a little research on you. But you make fonts.
That's right.
And did you start out, were you a graphic designer? This is such a weird thing to be in.
That's typeface fonts. When I say fonts to people in social settings, they think I might be talking about baptismal fonts or little fountains. And a lot of times they hear farts, too,
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, fonts. It's it's a very clumsy word. But everybody uses fonts. Once I explain it, they're like, oh, yeah, fonts. All right. Arial, Comic Sans, all that. Yeah.
Helvetica, that was the documentary.
Right. Everybody uses fonts, So, and I've been doing that for about 20 years, over 20 years. I've had my business for 21 now.
Do you remember when... how did you stumble into it? Or was it not a stumble? Was it thoughtful?
Yeah, it was a very thoughtful stumble. I was an art director at a magazine. I was working on a music magazine called Cake.
Oh, I remember that magazine.
And I was making all the fonts for myself to use in the magazine. And when people saw them there, they wrote to me. They sent me letters back in the day and asked how they could get them. So I stumbled into it, creating the fonts for myself to use in a magazine. And other people saw them, and then I started selling them through the magazine, through mail order. People would mail me a check, and I'd mail them a floppy disk that had the font on it.
How funny.
And
how much did you charge in the beginning? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was like $30 a font. And the floppy disk cost about $2, and the shipping cost about $1. So, and my time was the big commitment.
Sure.
Making fonts takes a lot of hours and hours and hours, but I just love it because it's intellectual property that I'm making, that it's something I can make once and then offer for sale again and again and again. That I was always so jealous of songwriters because they can write a song once
and get residuals.
Somebody else performs the song and they still get the residuals
right.
for as long as that song is being played somewhere. So,
do people ever steal your fonts? Are you ever oh yeah, that's mine, dude?
Yep.
And then you send a letter or something?
Well, it depends on who's stealing it. I mean, are you talking about a person on the internet that doesn't know what they're doing and they kind of steal it because they think it's fun? Or are you talking about a big corporation that
corporations
uses it
probably
big campaign and doesn't know that they didn't pay for it? But I do because it's a high profile thing, and how come I never got a check from that big company? Yeah, so that happens infrequently, and it gets settled eventually.
I can't even imagine how you're just sitting and reading a magazine and all of a sudden wow, that's mine, or that ad looks like something that I designed.
Yeah, and I see fonts all the time and I'm just like, nope, yep, as to whether it's mine or not, and sometimes I'm just like, oh, that kind of felt like mine, and then I pause it and rewind it and I'm like, yep, that's one of mine.
When you do a recipe, because I cook stuff and they say that no recipes are original recipes, and if you adapt a recipe, you have to change 3 ingredients. You must see fonts that look exactly like what you've done, but they're just tweaked a little too.
That's right. We got this wave now of things called geometric sans serifs, and they're just like Helvetica. They're very straightforward, normal, clean typefaces, and people are making lots of them. Lots of different people are making them, and they all look about the same. It's in the case of fonts, it's the computer source code that creates the font that is protectable.
Oh, cool.
And the visual representation of that alphabet is not. That you can look at an alphabet and copy it, and if you're creating new source code on the computer, making new vectors, it's a new thing. And so there are the different levels of stealing, that there's legal
Yep.
copyright issues. But if you skirt those, you have moral, ethical issues that if you're copying somebody, people will know, and
Sure.
it's not going to help you.
Yeah,
So,
it's not cool.
I mean, I'm just always trying to create a new and original variation of the alphabet, but a lot of times that is very referential to something else.
Do you do it on paper first and then turn it into a computer code?
I do it both ways. It's funny because I draw with my left hand and I work a mouse with my right hand, so the fonts come from both hands.
Yeah, you might be.
But I usually sketch it out on paper. I've been enjoying pencils for the last few years, and erasers, and sketching out the basic ideas of it. And then I hop into Font Lab, which is the program I use.
Did you design it?
To create the vectors that make the fonts. Did I design Font Lab?
Yeah.
No.
Someone else did, and you just work within that system.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. Yeah.
This is a really weird question, but I feel like the world is almost pollution for you, because it has to be like everything you see is inspiring, but at the same time clouds ideas. Does that make sense?
The typographically.
Yeah, like
words.
that everything you see, it must be so visually overwhelming sometimes.
That's right. That's right. It is. And like I have a painting studio too. You know, I mean, I was trained as a fine artist, but I work as a commercial artist.
Yep.
And I had a painting studio for years, the last 5 years or so, and I painted over every Helvetica, every font that I saw that wasn't mine. I painted over it, that I didn't want to look at anybody else's
Yeah,
fonts.
I can
They're
totally
everywhere,
understand that.
Every little made in USA or recyclable or insert, like every little word is
Clouding
has
your...
the potential to be annoying to
Yeah,
me.
I
because
can
it's
absolutely see that.
If it's something that just a font that yeah, all my font creations stemmed from being tired of all the fonts that were out there already, that I wanted to create something different.
Okay, I can totally see that. So
and one of my surprising hobby activities is golf. And nobody expects an artist, font designer, to be a golfer, but when I get out there on the golf course, there's no words. It's all green and leaves,
yeah,
and grass.
because it must be kind of exhausting sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of creative people, the world just can be exhausting sometimes, just in the way that
but
information
it's so stimulating
process is.
too when I go to a place like Barnes and Noble or Target or wherever there's a thing where there's lots of things to look at, whether they're lots of books or lots of products or whatever. I'm just like, wow, I look at all of them and I'm so lucky because I get to see my stuff there.
Yeah. Because you tell me about some of your more famous stuff that someone would maybe look at it and recognize and say, oh, that's Chank's.
Wow. There's a lot of them. But, it's like a long time ago there was James and the Giant Peach, the Walt Disney movie, and I did the word James.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a real early claim to fame. And
That's
that
a
same
big deal.
font, that same year, was on all the Taco Bell wrappers and nacho boxes and drink cups. Everything at Taco Bell had this Mr. Frisky font on it. And that's the same font that was on the James and the Giant Peach poster.
Cool.
So that was a pretty high-profile Disney thing that was really early in my career. And that font got picked up in a Barbie doll packaging and Coca-Cola packaging, and you'd see it here and there. It's just little one or two words here or there, but I saw it as like, wow, that's really significant because they made millions of those. And then more recently, I really like the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
They used my liquor store font for the name of the author. So it's not like the title of the book, but it was on the cover of all three books in the series. And that liquor store font was used for a World Series logo in 2015. And a new book by Stan Lee, from the guy who created the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
He's got a new series of books through Walt Disney Publishing. And it's my font that's all over the cover, and every page has my font for, the page numbers.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Do you name all your fonts?
Yeah, every font has to have a name so you can get it from the font menu.
Do you ever, when you, do you know right away, this is this, or do you labor over the name?
I love naming them. That's just part of the process. Like, my favorite font that I've made is called Liquor Store, and that one I saw a liquor store sign, and I said I should make a font called Liquor Store. So the name came first, and then that real rigid utilitarian design came with it, but the name came first. I have 325 fonts for sale.
That's a lot.
A lot of free fonts too, and a lot of corporate fonts too that aren't available anywhere. But they all have to have names.
And I'm assuming you get paid if it's more exclusive and it's theirs to keep. It costs more.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you remember like the biggest sale you ever had where you were just like, score?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I can talk about it.
Well, that's okay. You don't have to tell me the exact person, but.
Yeah. I mean, I did a big corporate branding thing for a food company.
Yep.
That somebody from Minneapolis who went to work at BBDO in New York got this gig, and they pitched, we'll be a font. It was like one page in their PowerPoint that turned into like 10 months worth of work for me.
Wow.
Because they said, we'll take that custom font. And I'm like, well, you can make a bold and an italic and a bold italics. And they're like, we'll take 4 fonts. And I'm like, well, you can make them all condensed too. And they're like, we'll take 8 fonts.
Oh,
and
my
I'm like,
gosh.
You could make Cyrillic and Greek and Central European character sets.
And so then.
And they said, and then I'm like, okay, I got to learn how to do that now. And so that job was big enough that it allowed me to go to the Type Directors Club in New York City and take these workshops on how to make Cyrillic fonts and how to.
I don't know what a Cyrillic font is.
That's for Russian and Ukrainian and those parts of the world.
Okay,
with
that's
the backwards
so funny
R and the
you bring
backwards
that up
K.
because I was traveling
Right.
and I was in Austria and Germany, and in Germany in particular, there's a lot of very cool fonts that are left over from the days of, frankly, the Nazis and propaganda and World War II.
On the storefronts and
and just on the buildings itself. And I thought about that just in the context of an alphabet and what that looks like, and how we go to Croatia and how Croatian looks so different.
What kind of alphabet did they use in Croatia?
I don't even know.
Was it Cyrillic, you think?
It could be. It could be. They don't. They speak English for the most part. There is Croatian dialects, but very few people speak them anymore.
Yeah. Well.
That's cool. So I was thinking about that with products. Yeah, like who knew like how Fruity Pebbles is gonna look? Like it's got that Fred Flintstone like font, but if you have that in a Russian grocery store, that's got to look really different.
Right. Yeah. So the people in those countries, in Russia and the Ukraine, they don't buy fonts.
Yeah.
But the companies that do business there need to have fonts to communicate with them.
Yeah.
And they want their own fonts so they can have their own voice. That the font is the voice of the printed word, and they wanted their own. So it's nice when I can, and that's a way that I can get paid to make those international fonts that do more.
Do you have apprentices, or are you doing all this work yourself?
I do almost all this work myself. I've had a number of interns pass through over the years and apprentices. And they go on to become designers. They don't make fonts for a living, but knowing how to make fonts makes them better designers because they know how the fonts work.
Do you feel like, I could, make twice as much money if I had 2 more people here? Or do you not think about money in terms of your day-to-day motivation?
I've been doing it for 20 years. So, I mean, I've tried hiring people and I can't figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not a good manager. I'm much better at doing all the work myself. That I can't figure out how to have more people put in more time to make more money.
So then the problem, I guess, or the opportunity is you probably have to charge more so that your time, because you only have an infinite amount of it.
Well, I mean, it's just so fascinating that I could create something once and sell it again and again and again and again,
So
and
the
that my whole back
residuals.
library of work that I've been doing for 20 years is still making money
Yeah,
for me
that's
too.
cool.
So yeah,
I
it
never
is
even thought about that.
residuals. I don't use that word a lot. I use royalties more often.
Yep,
but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's about the past work making money for the future, and that's always been something I've been working towards. But things don't turn out like I planned, that I always wanted, like, oh, yeah, someday people will be buying $2 fonts. They'll be like, yeah, I'll be able to sell millions of them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way because they get the free Google fonts, or they subscribe to Typekit and they get their fonts from there, or they take what's on the system menu that they don't want to make those micro purchases.
Yeah.
Which is weird because it works so well for apps. You know, that people were like, oh, $3 apps, $4
No
apps.
problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there's no way to buy fonts on your phone. And nobody does that, you know? So
You
that's
almost need a
frustrating.
font keyboard.
Maybe.
Like, you know, the
Yeah.
emoji keyboard or the
Yeah.
Gmail keyboard. Like, you could have a font keyboard where you could, with I'm totally not a technical person, but
Yeah.
you could just, you know, for every key on the keyboard that represented a font.
Right. And you shouldn't be a technical person. It shouldn't be that hard. There should
And then
just
you
be a
spend
way
like
to change
$24.95 to buy this cool font keyboard.
Yeah, and then you go to Facebook and you can't change the font. And then you go to Twitter and you can't change the font, you know?
Yeah,
And it's kind
which
of like
is
all
weird
these
too.
things. You know, I don't want to bring MySpace back. You could change the font there, but it was terrible.
Yeah.
You know, it was bad news when people were in pink Comic Sans,
Yep.
you know, next to yellow Helvetica. It was like, ah.
Yeah, and you just made me think about, like, when you're in Instagram or just the whole social media aspect, fonts are,
They're very controlled.
and it could be so cool to unleash that beast.
Right, but it would be really annoying.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And it would change the user experience so much.
It would break it.
When you, like, this is a random question, but can you think of, like, when you saw this font, you were like, man, that is, like, a great application of fonts for that?
Of mine?
Anyone's. Like, that you just saw it and went, wow, that just works so well. That's so cool.
I see it every time I see somebody use the liquor store font. I just love it because they use it all caps. You know, it's
Yep.
like today is on Will Smith's greatest hits, like 12 years ago. But like somebody mentioned Will Smith, and then I looked it up and I saw it, and I'm like, wow, that's a really cool cover. You know, that's my liquor store font for Will Smith's greatest hits. You know?
Yeah, that's got to be really cool. Do you know Kai Aarons by any chance?
I know Kai.
He's a friend of
Yeah.
ours from 1,000 years ago, and he designs a lot of
He does.
artwork for bands and musicians, and he's got kind of a style too. Like, when I see your work, I feel like I can, like, oh, I know who that is.
Yeah, that I have a range, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a condensed range.
But in a way that's your stamp too,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? So you brought in something to show me kind of what's next and what you're working on, because that was going to be one of my questions. Do you get bored with yourself?
I do. I mean, that's a lot of alphabets
Yeah,
that I've
and it-
made, and I can make more. But like when you're trying to make something original, that doesn't help you in the marketplace.
Yeah.
you know, it needs to be just a little bit off of normal. If you're too original, it doesn't help you at all because people don't get it.
Yep.
So, and I get really frustrated that the fonts are just never making enough money. That they're making a continued revenue stream from my royalties and my custom font work and my sales of new fonts, but it's never quite enough. So I'm always trying to do something else. And you mentioned my wife who started Chowgirls.
Yep.
She was my business manager back in the day. She worked at the font company with me, and she kind of started this side thing, and then it got bigger and bigger, and now she's got the great big business, you know, that kind of came as an idea separate from the font business. So I'm thinking maybe I could think of something different from the font business too. So I've been working with a laser, and I've been making these fun little guys. They're a little toy game kind of activity.
They're
thing.
sort of like that guy, is it Keith Haring? Is that his name?
Yep.
Kind of figurines made out of like a lucite or wood. There's some magnets. There's some that like stack on top of each other like blocks. And then letters, obviously. There's
Right.
that store, Hunt and Gather. Have you ever been to that store?
Yeah, lots
where
of letters.
outside of it is all these letters, and I always think, oh, that's cool. Letters mean something to people for some reason.
That's right. Everybody's got a favorite letter. But so the neat thing, the thing I've been working with mostly is a laser, and it allows me to take two-dimensional vectors, which I'm good at. I
Yeah.
can make shapes, two-dimensional pretty well. But then by putting a solid thing into the laser and then cutting it out, it becomes a three-dimensional thing. So that's like magic to me when my two-dimensional vectors can become a three-dimensional object. And I made a lot of letters, and they're good and they're fun and everything, but if you offer 26 letters, if you offer one letter, somebody's going to be like, one of the 25 others that's their favorite.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, I don't want that letter. I want a different letter. So filling custom orders with all these letters was really challenging for me. I couldn't find a way to package it up and sell it.
Yep.
So these guys, they don't have letters. They're just like a little set of 12 guys. And they don't have that concrete representation of a letter.
Yep.
So So I think they're more instantly likable and acceptable for what they are, and not like.
And you were telling me a funny story about that you made all these lucite guys. You made this really cool set and labored over the set.
And the set had the lucite guys in a wooden box that has custom shapes of their silhouettes that they pop into. And then, it's all the parts that I cut out of the box that fell out. The little wooden...
the wooden guys
the
that
little
fell
wooden
out
guys
onto the
that fell
floor.
out. Yeah, I painted them. I spray painted them, and people liked them best of all when I showed them at Art World. I tried to sell my little acrylic guys for $20 a piece, and they're like, "Well, that's nice." And I'm like, "Well, these little wooden guys are $1 a piece," and they're like, "I'll take 5." You know, I'm like, "All right." And so everybody wanted those, and they don't even do anything. Is the thing?
They're
that,
just
you
like
know,
magnets or just
they're
these
too
wooden
thin
guys.
to stand up. They don't balance. They don't really stack very well. I put magnets on them. But...
We were laughing because I said that's kind of how business is, where you think you have this idea that you're going to sell, and then that isn't the idea that people want. It's the sort of like that idea or
Right.
the one you had before that.
Yeah, so I really like these guys that I've been making. I feel like they're kind of a combination of Keith Haring's figurative guy style of little characters mixed with Jenga as a stacking game, kind of like Green Army Men, in that you buy a set of them and you can stand them up, or
Green Army
dominoes
Men,
and that they knock over. So, and so I've been working with was a 3/8 of an inch and a 1/2 inch thick, and I'm trying to get the thickness just right. And I think what I want is wood that's the same thickness as dominoes.
Yep.
And what are dominoes made out of?
Ivory was the old-fashioned dominoes.
Elephant tusks.
Yeah,
For real.
in the day, yes.
And I grew up with black dominoes.
And you had the black ones, or
Were they made out of
ivory
ebony?
ones. They could be. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm trying to find a nice solid wood that's kind of heavy and just the right thickness, and that'll be my next iteration of them. So I've been working with these guys since January, and I'm trying to refine the design to something that could be mass produced.
3D printing.
3D printing's really slow.
Okay.
That's the thing. The laser's fast enough I can actually do production with it.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I'm over here trying to give you ideas. We're gonna make like
Yeah.
skin, or how about temporary tattoos?
Right. Well, it's translatable.
Yeah.
That's what I like about the guys too. Is that
And you can make shirts and merch.
the other one I've been working on is making them a little bit bigger,
Yeah.
out of wood, with little pegs on their feet as little garden guys.
Yeah.
And they're dancing around the garden, you know. And,
Like the kid, or what's the slow crossing turtle
Yeah.
sign?
Yeah.
Kind of like that, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. So, but the impression from people I've showed them to was like, hey, these are fun. I get it. I like it, you know. And
You know what else? Okay, now we're just gonna like totally build you a whole new business here.
Yeah, that's I'm
Like,
always
what's
trying.
that new game? Is it Cube?
Right. Yeah,
Where you throw some mallet at
Is that
things
new?
and knock them over. No, it's old, but
Okay,
it's
right,
kind of
it's-
making a resurgence
right,
in the
okay.
beer guy circles. So you could make the guys that you knock over.
Yeah.
You could have like a whole game.
Yeah.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it works really. I think of them as like a bar circus. That if you go into a bar
Yeah.
and you start there and you start stacking them up, people start coming over saying, "What's that?"
We could
You
do
know?
a giant art installation,
then,
Chank, in some park.
And it just becomes interactive, and if you let other people touch it, and then they can stack on top of it, and you take turns trying to see how high you can stack it, then eventually it falls.
Or we
And
could do
that's
life-size guys.
And that's such a, when they fall over, it's just kind of like, oh, I don't have to worry about it falling over anymore. It fell.
It's a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
You are very creative, and I'm real pleased to meet you. You're, in some ways, do people tell you like you're kind of iconic for the Twin Cities? Have you ever been told that before?
Yeah. No, I'm really grateful for the way people treat me and respect me and admire me and see
They
what
do.
I'm doing, and I'm a role model. And it's just like when I was younger, I wanted to be famous.
You did.
Yeah, and now I'm like, God, I should have thought about being rich. You know, it didn't occur to me that you could become famous without being rich. You know, and my problem is that I like small business, that I don't want to work with big corporations, but I have to. You know, and
Yeah.
I try and find that balance of finding a big corporate client that'll give me a lot of money, and then smaller small business clients that'll make me happy.
Yeah.
And I probably go towards the small business impractical projects more often than I should because it makes me happy. You know? So, and I didn't plan on being happy. That wasn't part of my plan, but I think I'm mostly that.
Yeah, and sometimes for creatives that takes a while to get there. So,
and I'm not famous either. I'm kind of niche famous. I'm like this weird
you're famous
subculture kind of like geek hero, you know. But I go out and I'm like, hey, I make fonts, and they're like, what?
Where's your farts?
You mean like baptismal fonts, like little fountains?
Where's your font studio?
A basement.
Okay, and you're still the traveling font salesman.
That's right. Yeah, traveling around. I that was a early success, was going places and saying, "Hi, I make fonts. Would you like to buy some?" And
now do they all come to you?
They come to my distributors. So yeah, I used to sell a lot more fonts directly, and now I've been more focused on getting my fonts into the hands of my distributors like fonts.com or myfonts.com or Typekit, which is part of Adobe. The places where people go to buy fonts anyways,
yep.
I'm there, and I get a royalty check.
So you're not the traveling font salesman. The distributor is the traveling font salesman.
Well, I try and sell custom fonts. So
yep.
That's when I travel. I'm like, these are all the fonts I've made. They're available in all those places. But if you want your own custom font, I could do that for you.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of an education process because they're like, well, I've never heard about a custom font. And the majority of the custom font clients I work with have never done it before. You know, it's like,
what does a custom font cost? Just basically,
how much you got?
I'm going to say maybe $5,000. 5 to 10.
It depends on who you are, what it's going to be used for, and how complicated it is for me to make. I make a lot of handwriting fonts for individuals, like poets and artists that want their own handwriting.
Okay, tell me
about that. And I could do that for $100 or $200, depending on if I like them.
So if you're,
but more like a corporation. Like a book publisher might pay closer to $1,200 to $1,500 for that kind of exclusive font. And if they like it, maybe they'll ask for a bold or an italics, and that's a little bit of an upsell. It really doesn't go much more than $5,000 per font nowadays because there are so many. You got 75,000 other fonts to choose from, many of which are free. It's hard to get the corporations to pay for a unique font, but it benefits the brand. It adds distinction and uniqueness to your.
For sure.
But yeah, one of my best clients ever was PBS Kids. I love them.
Oh, did you do the font that was like the square letters?
Yeah, they're real happy, friendly font that's on all the shows. It says like Up Next. The Cat in the Hat knows a lot about that. That's my font.
Oh, that is great.
And I made a family of 8 fonts for them, and they use them through their website and the commercials between episodes and everything. And that was the thing where they had a redesign in the works, and they're like, can you make a font that goes with this? And I showed them, and they liked it, and they said, can you make a font that goes with that? And I made a complimentary font, and then they wanted the bolds and the condensed and all these other weights. And it was another project that took about a year that started as a real simple question from the client saying, hey, can we make a custom font? What would that be like? Them ending up being with, wow, we love all our fonts. They're great. Thank you.
Yeah, they're lovely. Well, I wish you success. What are you calling your guys?
Fun little guys.
Okay, fun little guys. We wish you success with that. We wish you success with your fonts. We wish you success as the partner of Heidi, who's expanding Chowgirls Killer Catering at a rapid rate, which everybody loves food, right?
And they use my fonts there a lot still. They got it on the both sides of the building and the lobby. They got 3 different fonts of mine that.
And she did a cookbook too that had
my fonts all through the cookbook too.
That was
you wouldn't
lovely.
notice it, but the text font in there, that's one of mine too. And they're making good food and using good fonts.
All right. Well, good fonts is where it starts. We're here with Chank Diesel. People can find you at Chank Fonts or Chank.com.
Chank.com. Yeah.
Okay. And what's next besides your little guys?
Oh, I'm working on new versions of my liquor store font. I made a font called Liquor Store about 20 years ago.
I'm going to go back and look for this because I know I've probably seen it, but I want to know exactly.
Yeah, they use it for the Northeast Farmers Market. It's their logo. They use it so many places. And you see it in town, too, in the architectural signs, too. Some liquor stores, but like the gold medal flower sign that's up above the Mississippi River, that's kind of the same font, except they didn't have lowercase letters and you couldn't type with it. So now I'm working on a bold version, and I'm working on an inline version that's got a little line inside it, and then different overlap. It's called chromatic fonts.
All right. I'm going to check
Multicolor
it out.
fonts where each layer is a different color, and they overlap each other to create real grand effects.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, my pleasure.